All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers media network. We're coming to you with a Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall player profile scouting special. Look, he's been signed for a little bit. He's been an official Chelsea player for more than a hot moment. But, some things take time. And look, Chelsea have been doing plenty of other things keeping us busy over the past couple weeks, particularly as we look forward to the start of the preseason tour in the U.S. that is just over a week and a couple days away. You're potentially watching this or listening to this on the 15th of July, which means you've either witnessed England do the business or Spain concluding their job. But we don't know exactly what will have happened, but we do know on any of these player profile episodes that we do, Sam is coming with all the research, all the notes, all of the review work done to give us a full perspective on what we can expect from Chelsea's latest signings. So, Sam, how are you feeling just in general, knowing that we have another midfielder added to the bunch? Because that was not necessarily the area that we expected Chelsea to make any signings in this summer. But, we're still missing a winger. We're still missing a striker. And this kind of came out of nowhere when it eventually happened. So we haven't had a chance to talk about this deal in detail together. Just how are you feeling maybe generally about the move? And then we can kind of get into all the specifics, his story, strengths, weaknesses, and what the tactical fit's going to be.
Yeah, I think there's been quite a muted response to this deal. And I find that slightly surprising because I'll put my neck on the line out for this, but he might be the player who impresses Chelsea fans the most in this coming season. I think he's a very underrated player. And obviously, if you go back to the sporting director's interview on the club website, they said that they're going to not just try and procure the most promising talent from across the world, but they're also going to be looking at opportunities in the market. And I think when you have a club like Leicester who had a massive axe hanging over their head in terms of points deduction because of PSR, and they've got an academy graduate who's PL proven, who had a Palmer-like season, I would say, for them last season under our current manager. It made sense to take that gamble for 30 million. I think that's um, below the market valuation for a player of his ilk. And I think there are tactical reasons. Obviously, the easiest parallel to say is, oh, you're playing for your previous manager. But I think there's more there. I think there is a deeper reason which we'll discuss later on in terms of why he's been bought in. But overall, I'm very happy with the deal. Obviously, if we didn't have Kani Chukwuemeka, Kendry Paev, Conor Gallagher, then I would be elated because, it would be the right kind of signing. But right now, it's just a logjam everywhere that I'm questioning where he fits in terms of squad building. But nonetheless, a very, very good player to have in your ranks. So I'm happy.
It will be interesting to see how he gets on, particularly, and you highlighted this just a moment ago, that you have a player who played under Chelsea's new manager Enzo Maresca last year at Leicester in the championship. So maybe some of the numbers are not necessarily extremely replicatable season over season because it was a massive step up in, I think, his contributions last year for Leicester in the championship versus the prior season in the Premier League. I would say there have been people who question the idea of, oh, you'll go sign this guy for Maresca, but at the same time, you wouldn't go sign a guy or some guy for Poch. I don't necessarily know if that's like the best argument to go out and make. And I think the reason why I might suggest that I don't think that's a good argument, Sam, is you had signed the player the manager in Pochettino on a 2-year deal with like a club option for potentially a third. And you were assessing, would we offer him another year? Would we go beyond that? Did we feel like we saw enough? And it feels as if you had made that decision potentially knowing that you were going to try this idea of bringing players in that fit a general profile of how you want Chelsea to play. And you're more trying to align the manager now with the types of players that we've already recruited. And it maybe just so happens that the style that we want to play, Dewsbury-Hall fits into that situation much, much better than maybe some of the players Chelsea would have been asked to go sign under Pochettino that maybe he has played with before that would fit Chelsea.
Absolutely. And I also think that it was just trying out first and making sure that you made that heavy transition from a side that was essentially at the worst place that it could be, with players that had no interest of, playing for the club anymore. There were a lot of disenchanted people in the dressing room. You flip that squad, and after that, then it's super difficult to say this is where we need to strengthen. So if Pochettino would have been given the opportunity to stay for a second season, I'm 100% certain that they would have considered his opinion on certain players, in terms of, do we need to strengthen this position? But it's also, I think, out of necessity. If, say, Mikhailo Mudryk would have worked last season and he would have managed 20 goals and assists, we wouldn't be talking about getting another left winger at all. So, we're in this position now, and there's clear gaps in terms of what we need to ensure that Maresca succeeds. Like you said, there's a lot more riding on his success now because they made a decision to sack a manager who was super popular with the players, who managed to get them from 38 goals to 76 in the space of a year. So yeah, you need to make sure that you're doing everything possible to ensure that his success is your success. So I think that's the reason why. But like you said, it's an easy parallel. Unfortunately, it's Mount is Lampard's son, Jorginho is Sari's son, kind of this thing. But yeah, like I said, I think there is an underlying rationale, logic to why he's here, and hopefully he'll perform well enough for us to, completely move away from that narrative altogether.
It's the Gordon Ramsay Hell's Kitchen meme where someone is getting yelled at who is not Dewsbury-Hall and by Maresca as the Gordon Ramsay figure. And then the opposite is the consoling Gordon Ramsay to Dewsbury-Hall. Hopefully it is not that bad and it is a level of meritocracy within the team selection and side, but that is something that we will have to wait and see over the weeks and months ahead as we get through preseason and into the start of this season. We're going to talk about, though, the history of Dewsbury-Hall, how he got to Chelsea, what his playing career has looked like up until this point. We are going to again get into the strengths, his weaknesses, and what the tactical fit is under Enzo Maresca and in this Chelsea side. Before we do that, a little quick admin out of the way. As always, a big thank you to everybody supporting the podcast. Again, a free way to do that. Always leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you haven't done it before, very easy, very quick thing to do, and super appreciate it. Doesn't cost you anything, that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You also can join us on YouTube. Just crack past 33,000 subscribers there. If you're not one of them, good opportunity. Now is a great time. Yesterday was a great time. Today's an even better time, if you haven't done it already, to join us as a subscriber over on YouTube. You can like and comment on the videos, hit the bell icon to get notified, and leave those wonderful comments saying, thanks, Sam, for doing this episode. You also can sign up to our free weekly newsletter, the London is Blue Dispatch, written by Sam as well. Or you can join our free or paid version of our Discord community to get in the conversation. Plenty of chatter going to be happening in about an hour from now after we finish recording, when the Euro final and later tonight when the Copa final take place. But Sam, that's all the admin out of the way. We got the business done. Now it's your turn to spin the yarn as you typically do and run us through the footballing journey of Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall.
So yeah, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So he joined the Leicester Academy at the age of 8, and he's essentially progressed from the under 8s and the under 9s all the way up to the senior side. He made his debut in January 2020 against Brentford, and then a couple of days later was sent on loan to Blackpool for 6 months. He scored 4 times there in 10 games, and the interest there was prominent in him the next season. So he was sent to Luton Town over the next year in the championship. He stayed there for a year and ended up winning 4 awards at Luton's end of season awards. The Ian Pearce Memorial Trophy, which is given to the Luton player who earned the most man of the match awards at home via ratings given by this publication called the Luton News. He won the Junior Supporters Player of the Season, the Internet Player of the Season, and the Players Player of the Season. So made a profound impression at Luton. He returned to Leicester for the 21-22 season when they were in the Premier League, and made his debut, the second debut, when he came on for James Maddison, who he eventually ended up being as a successor for in that position as a primary playmaker slash creator in midfield. And he went on to make 59 Premier League appearances for the Foxes, and then they were relegated, unfortunately. So in the championship, then Enzo Maresca signed as the new manager, and I think he essentially just gave him a revival in terms of giving him a new role that made the most of his strengths. Made sure that he wasn't being shackled by being in a positionally restricted position. So he was given a sort of like a very mobile box to box role in midfield, and he ended up having a Palmer-esque season for them. So 12 goals, 14 assists in just 41 appearances. That's 26 goal contributions. And I know people frown saying that, oh, it's in the championship, but it's still super impressive numbers, and he just about ended up missing out on the Championship Player of the Season by a whisker to another Chelsea target, Crescencio Somerville. So has had a great season. I think he was on the radar of a lot of big clubs. Brighton, famously, were just about rubbing their hands in glee, and we stole him from under their noses and got him for a bargain. And famously, he's also the academy scholar who was given the responsibility for cleaning N'Golo Kante's shoes, and he says that he did it very diligently every single day because he didn't want people to say that N'Golo wasn't performing well because his shoes weren't good enough. So seems like a lovely guy. Obviously knows and has been around, you know, the best of the best in N'Golo Kante, has touched greatness, has cleaned its boots. So hopefully we'll add something similar to our ranks as he joins us for next season.
Look, if you are on the side of Leicester signing closer to N'Golo Kante than Leicester signing of Danny Drinkwater, we have recruited well and you are doing something right. So again, that is hopefully where he will exist on the scale as we advance forward. But we're going to take our first break and we'll get back all about the strengths, what Dewsbury-Hall will be bringing to Chelsea, what we should be excited for as fans. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Sam. So I know for those who did not take the time to watch the entirety of that Leicester campaign to win the championship and get themselves an automatic promotion back to the Premier League after 1 year out, and what got Enzo Maresca the Chelsea job effectively. Why don't you run us through some of the things, particularly around the fact that the role change and how he's had a bit of an evolution as a player under Maresca, and is a more improved, more well-rounded midfielder, and particularly like how he can be involved, how he can be a driver, and how he's going to leverage that movement potentially to really bring some dynamism to the midfield.
Yeah, and I thank Serendipity for it because I usually watch 6 to 7 games. Well, if time forbids me from doing it, like a minimum of 5 games before I assess a player. But I ended up watching one third of Leicester's season for Enzo Maresca, and so I got a lot of KDH minutes there. And what really struck out for me, Dan, is that he is a multi-phase central midfielder, somebody who's comfortable in multiple positions, has had an education in terms of how he should function in different roles. So he's played at left central midfield, right central midfield, defensive midfield in double pivot, and he's also played in the 10 role for Maresca at Leicester, and he's very good. If you just count his contributions from, I would say, the middle third and the attacking third, he's superb. Obviously, we've talked about his numbers there in terms of 26 goals and assists in terms of contributions, but you keep them aside. And he's also offering you 2+ shots per 90 minutes from central midfield. He's had 5 shot creating actions per 90, which is quite high. Just to give you a little bit of context, only Cole Palmer crossed the 5 threshold for us last season. I don't think anybody else crossed 4 except Palmer. So he's somebody who will sort of raise the shot creating or shot taking threshold for players around him, which is always a good player to have in your books. He's also tremendous value on the ball. You look at stat bombs, carry, and dribble on ball volume, on ball value, and open play XG assisted on ball value. And he ranks in the 99th percentile for both those metrics. So he's super dangerous in the opponent's half. He can carry it, he can dribble with it. He's very good in transition as well. So he offers you multiple facets. And obviously, if you're getting 10 plus goals and assists, then you are, offering just the amount of output you need from a box to box slash 8-10 midfielder in those ranks. So I would say like having somebody like him who's offering not just the attacking side of it, but also making sure that you're very solid in midfield on the left hand side. He's a very very good addition. We've been missing that, and hopefully he'll be able to fill into that hole. So that one point I would say is like his profile is a perfect fit there. The second thing that stood out for me is his engine. Again, very underrated as a trait. We've got one of the best in the business in Conor Gallagher, and he rarely gets any praise for it. But you look at Dewsbury Hall, and he's very active in terms of diligently making his tackles, in terms of getting into duels. He likes getting stuck in, so he's not a luxury 8-10. He's not somebody who will, glide off the ball, goal in a score, and be happy to assist. He's also very good in getting his legs in the right place and winning the ball back. So his ground duel percentage was a respectable 56%. He's competing around 4.6 ground duels a game, which is also a very good number. And again, I was looking at StatsBomb metrics. So he managed 17.4 possession adjusted pressures, which I would say ranks maybe like a notch below the elite. Just to give you again a reference point, Mark Guiu at centre forward was in the 99th percentile with 24 pressures. So he was on the elite spectrum of somebody who's a pressing forward who will run for his life and chase it down like a dog chases an ice cream duck. Um, Dewsbury Hall maybe a little more reserved in that midfield role. And Maresca sort of gave him that responsibility because in a tactical system like Maresca's, the burden of the pressing comes to the front four and the wingers, the centre forward, and the more advanced eight, which is Dewsbury Hall. So he likes doing that side of the game where he's pressing, the opposition centre backs. He's trying to win the ball back. So he is very well versed in that side of the game as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see where he slots in from an out of possession perspective, but he's there. He's not somebody who will be a passenger. And the third prominent strength is, I would say, his movement, which is quite, an important aspect but maybe overlooked for an attacking slash box to box midfielder. Very good at making late runs into the box, arriving for cutbacks. He's surprisingly, surprised me because I didn't see him do it as much for Leicester in the Premier League, but there were so many times where he was running beyond Daka and Vardy into space. He was chasing long balls. He was getting 1v1 with the goalkeeper and showed some lovely composure to finish. So he's got all sorts of runs, and he's only 178 centimeters tall, which is quite short compared to just, the guys that we've signed in the window. I mean, you look at the defense and they're all 190 centimeters. He's quite short, but he's got a good header on him. So he'll pop up with the occasional headed goal as well. So I would say his movement is quite underrated, very intelligent, out of possession, off the ball threat. So if Maresca is going to get his wish of camping his side in the opposition, attacking third and sustaining pressure, then having somebody like him who can hurt you with and without the ball is obviously a big, big bonus. So all three boxes tick marked very smartly, and I think that's why he's good value for your money.
So, for those who are not on the metric system, that is the 5'10 size that we're going to get from Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. Again, not as tall as some of those defenders that we have just signed to give Chelsea a little bit of a attempt at dominance on set pieces that we did not have last season. I think other areas, particularly as we talk about midfielders, passing is always going to be a question. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you thought about his overall passing, the way that he contributes, and then I think some of the consistency that we can expect from him. I know that we've really had an interesting run over the last one season when it came to midfielder availability, where we thought, oh, we have one of the best midfields in the league with Enzo coming back at the start of the season fit after signing Moises Caicedo, after bringing in Lavia, after having Conor Gallagher available. And that didn't really pan out the way that we thought it would last season. And I think we did see some positives in terms of Caicedo really improving at the end of the season. We saw Lavia for 30 minutes. We had Enzo go out due to injury, and we had Conor Gallagher take the armband because he just seemingly could not get injured and stayed fit for the vast majority of the season. So, how do you view the passing and maybe his consistency and availability as a part of his maybe his strengths?
Yeah, I say this after watching him in the Premier League as well. I think he's very elegant on the ball, very press resistant as well. He's not somebody who's faced by pressure. So even when he receives in tight spaces, clean. It's not like he's, fumbling or he looks flustered. Very clean footwork on the ball. So I don't think he's going to be struggling with the pace of the Premier League or with reduced spaces. I think he's very well accustomed to it. His passing is, I would say, like at least in the attacking sense, very, very good. He is able to use his weaker foot as well. So his right foot is also very good in terms of pulling out some high risk, high reward passes. Um, he, I think, created 20 big chances last season, which is a very good number considering that he played around 41 games, appeared in 41 games. So he's creating a big chance every 2 games from a slightly more difficult position. And yeah, his through balls were a joy to watch. The left foot is obviously a wand, and he's had through balls from wide where he's basically put in a curved ball inside. So not really a cross, but a very well timed delivery from the left half space, which curved inside towards the striker. He's done that with his right foot as well, slotting in, threading in a very lovely through ball for Daka and for Wadi. So he's got that vision. He's got the ability to execute it well. So his passing is definitely going to be a strength. I mean, 14 assists doesn't come if you aren't good with the ball at your feet. So yeah, I think he's obviously going to struggle to scale it up in terms of the Premier League. He's not going to hit the 10 assists mark, but if he gets close, like if he gets 10 goals and 7 assists, I'd be happy. So I think on the ball, he's going to be a big, big asset. And the other point, like you mentioned, injury issues, very, very good, squeaky clean injury record. He's only missed 4 games in 4 years, and all four of them came in the 21-22 season. So he's just from an availability standpoint, you pay that much money and hope that he's a 7 on 10, 8 on 10, your job is done, especially even in crunch fixtures like the Conference League. The fact that you're going to be playing 65, 70 games, I think he's, by virtue of just that stat point, a good addition to the squad. And yeah, I mean, even from a consistency perspective, just a playing perspective, he's been ridiculously good. I haven't seen him have a stinker as such, like where he's been anonymous or he's disappeared. He doesn't hide during games, even when he's having like a torrid time. He'll take like 10 minutes and then after that he'll get back on his groove and try to, influence the game in the way that he can. So again, a game changer. First day of the season, he again popped up for Leicester. They had to make a statement in terms of new manager, most expensively assembled squad in the Premier League, lots of high wages, and he scored twice on the first day against Coventry to basically rescue them and give them a win on the first day. So I think he's definitely there from a consistency standpoint also. So he's going to be an overall very important player for us. I do think people are still questioning who's going to start in that left central midfield slot. Is it going to be him? Is it going to be Conor Gallagher? Is it going to be Kani Chukwuemeka? Is it going to be a surprise and we see Nkunku or Cole Palmer there? There's all sorts of questions. But he will give a lot of those guys, a strong, strong run for their money in terms of competing for it. And I wouldn't be surprised if he starts that, to be honest.
So you mentioned this idea of somewhere between 10 goals and 7 assists, which is 17 goal contributions, would be a good place to be. I think is the floor expectation for him that you would have based upon the strengths be at the bar that Conor Gallagher had last season? And I know this might upset some people by saying it, but Conor Gallagher was the third tied for third along with Raheem Sterling. Two names that draw a lot of criticism from supporters. Were tied with 12 goal contributions apiece. Is that your floor expectation for Dewsbury-Hall this season?
Well, if he was playing the Premier League for the first time straight off, jumping from the Championship, I would say give him a season. But I
Mm-hmm.
think he's already got a taste for the big time. So playing in a better side, hopefully, he will be able to offer a pronounced output. So I wouldn't expect him to have a blunted first season. At least in the league, I would expect him to cross the 10 threshold quite easily. I would be surprised if he goes anywhere near 15, 20. I think you can expect maybe like 7 for each if you're lucky. So 14 or 15 would be just on the dot, but anything above that is a bonus. Especially because he doesn't like he's a very good penalty taker, but I think he only took one penalty last season. So that makes his 26 tally quite impressive. So if he can repeat that and give you 15, then I would say, in the section that we're going to discuss after this in terms of a tactical fit. That's exactly what you need from him. So hopefully from a flow standpoint, I would say 10 to 15 is the benchmark we should be looking for.
Well, if you're watching on YouTube, you should let us know in the comments what you think the goal and assist contribution for Dewsbury-Hall is going to be in the first season or what you're looking for. But after we get back from this last ad break, we'll talk about the areas where we think he can improve and how he's going to fit into the Enzo Maresca Chelsea side that is going to be starting the season against Manchester City. No pressure. Stay tuned. We're back. All right, Sam. So areas that he can improve on. And usually you come with a list because we've been talking about players that are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 that are less experienced, don't have necessarily years within the Premier League or even, experience years kind of across any of the top 5 European leagues. So typically it's 3 to 4 things. They're very detailed. And it seems like you have come up almost empty handed here. You have one thing on the list as an improvement area for Dewsbury-Hall. So I know that might shock some people, but why don't you talk about why that is and what it is that you think he needs to improve upon as he makes the jump to Chelsea?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that you could improve on is just the nature of his high risk, high reward passing. He is, always trying to take the more adventurous option, likes carrying it in through tight spaces, likes carrying it towards goal. Even with his passes, sometimes you'll see a good run from Daka or Wadi, and he'll try to pick that out from 30, 35 yards, and he can give the ball away. So that can be a little bit, of an issue, especially in the Premier League, where there is a lot of focus on avoiding transitions, of making sure that you aren't giving away the ball in dangerous areas. But luckily he has a manager who has seemingly encouraged that and given him the reason to say, okay, don't worry about it. We've got a rest defense of 5 defenders, so you can afford to lose the ball, and it probably won't be as big an issue as you think it would be. So again, like I'm looking at his numbers, and his pass percentage is always like somewhere between 75 and 80. And in the Premier League, that's a bit of a question mark in terms of good technically secure passers will be somewhere even 85 to 90. Like De Bruyne would probably be around 85. So he's not there in terms of using the ball intelligently enough when the opportunity arises. I think he's more of a key pass spammer. So you could probably say he's closer to a Bruno Fernandes than he is Kevin De Bruyne. I'm not saying that the output will be there, but I'm just saying in terms of how they utilize their creativity. One's always looking to go for that adventurous ball. The other's a little more nuance. I think he finds his windows very well. He assesses options much better. So I would say he fits in that latter category. If he can fine tune that, great. But then again, why would you blunt such a such an interesting source of goals? You should be able to use that to your credit. So especially in a system where you might not see Malo Gusto run up too much, you might not see Reese or Chilwell or whoever it is at left back get him up into those spaces a lot. Then you obviously want him doing a lot of the heavy lifting in attack. So just a point to be careful about. He can give away city balls, and again, at 25, 26, you want that ironed out of your game to be um, technically secure, but also dangerous. I think that's just expecting what I would say is from an elite creator, not from a player who should improve a facet of his game. So just putting it out there, it's not a weakness. He would be a better player if he improves it.
Good things to point out, and I didn't mention this earlier, but you were correct that he did only have one penalty that he took and converted last season. So if you want to go for non-penalty goals and assists, he was at 25 in the championship last season at just over 3,600 minutes, the most he's played in any single league campaign season that he has had in senior football. So as we talk about and maybe transition to how Maresca is going to use him and what his fit is going to be. I I think we touched on a couple of things that are super interesting. So there's the idea that he might be one of the more advanced midfielders, really that transition between the midfield into attack and enjoying a role as a creator, potentially with the assist or even popping up with some goals across. How that's going to balance with Palmer and how much of a season can he recreate from last season to this season. I think we all expect maybe some minor regression because, you know, even if you maybe just reduce out the fact that maybe Chelsea don't get as many penalties this season, that would impact the number of goals that he can contribute. And then are things going to happen like Conor Gallagher potentially being sold, a potentially if we get a full healthy season of Christopher Nkunku? There's a lot of variables here. So I guess maybe how are you thinking about his role and where does that maybe shift like the midfield power rankings? I think when we signed him, we were trying to do this chart of like, well, if we look at midfielders and maybe you want to do it in a different way, I was looking at like, well, who's guaranteed to start? And I think like, oh, Caicedo is probably the first one who's guaranteed to start. And then you start to have questions around, well, is Enzo healthy? You know, does Enzo give Maresca what he wants? And then so if Enzo's then the second, well, then it goes down to Dewsbury-Hall and is Conor Gallagher available or is he sold? And then it goes down to Lavia. Like, well, that was where I started to feel like I wasn't as comfortable beyond the 1 and 2. And maybe you convince me that actually the 2 is even shaky and Enzo is maybe the third choice kind of option within that midfield pairing or grouping rather.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty set in stone in terms of how the squad building looks like. So you've got a DM who's essentially going to function a lot like a register. He's going to be deep. He's going to be orchestrating that first phase. He's not going to participate a lot in the pressing or, running around a lot from box to box. It's going to have a more conservative position. And in our squad, it's going to be Enzo and Lavia competing for that spot. I do think Enzo is obviously, for multiple reasons, above Lavia. Both of them are weak defensively, but just from a technical standpoint, from using certain skill sets, I think Enzo trumps Lavia. But that position is for those two guys. Even Caicedo can play it as an emergency DM, but again, it's the same reason why you don't put Kante as a defensive midfielder in a lone pivot. You want him to have that freedom to anticipate where the spaces are going to be, to close down, to intercept, and have that amount of freedom. On the right hand side, in that box to box role, where you're doing a lot of the tactical duties that Maresca demands from his 8-10, I would say that that's where Caicedo is number one by far. Nobody touches him there at all. And then after that, you'll probably rotate him with Andre Santos if he stays at the club. So that's going to be my number two backup for Caicedo there. On the left hand side, the more attacking eight, somebody who's also doubles up as a 10, who's going to be getting into the box, trying to score. I think that's where you have three options now. You have Dewsbury-Hall, you have Kani Chukwuemeka, and you have Conor Gallagher. And I know a lot of the times people come in and say, oh, Gallagher's going to be benched. And every manager comes and starts picking him. And that is for good reason. So again, it's going to be, I think, a race between those three guys. And there are minutes to go around. A lot of the times, I think even with somebody picking a first spot, you will have enough minutes to go around for Chukwuemeka and for Andre Santos. So I don't think from a minutes perspective, I'm worried as much. But yeah, that spot is probably going to be Gallagher versus Dewsbury Hall. And that's I think going to be the big question. You sort of mentioned like where does he fit from a tactical standpoint, and this is something that I did write a lot about in the newsletter. I think the one 2 weeks back where I talked about like why exactly are we going for him from a
We call that
tactical
a plug,
fit.
Sam. We call that a plug and a reminder for people to go sign up for the newsletter because you would have read about it before you heard it on the podcast.
Oh man, I mean, yeah, I don't like blowing my own trumpet, but I
That's what
try
I'm
to
here
sort
for.
of like be ahead, to be ahead of the curve. And yeah, so just to give you again, in terms of how the numbers are being visualized or from a squad building perspective, so Chelsea's front four last season, Jackson, Palmer, Sterling, Gallagher, they had 49 of Chelsea's 76 league goals. Now Leicester's four, Vardy, Fatawu, Mavdidi, and Dewsbury Hall at 48 of 88. So obviously there's a bigger quality disparity in the championship with Leicester's squad, but the expectation is that, you know, they come up to the Premier League and you have a more tactically conservative approach where attackers attack and defenders defend, then, you know, maybe you're easier to keep an eye on. There are certain caveats you run into tactically and you figure out, oh, this is not working. So you're probably not going to be able to score those many level of goals in the Premier League. Now, you pointed out a very interesting point. Um, Palmer probably does not score 22 again. We probably don't get 11 penalties again. And attacking fullbacks like Reece James and Malo Gusto and Ben Chilwell aren't going to be able to contribute, you know, some of the upper numbers that they manage. Gusto managed six, I think, last season. Reece easily hits 10 plus when he's fully fit, as does Chilwell. So that's 20 goals and assists just gone, evaporated from your tally. So how are you going to make those up? So when you're looking at how your attack is going to function, you probably want 80 goals in the Premier League to get top three, you know, without a question. So if you want that top three, then your front four need to be able to provide 20 goals and assists. And I'm going at a very, not very, but slightly above what is needed approach because you try to hit 20 and you're fine. But just to give you an example, Leicester's front four hit an average of 20. You know, Dewsbury Hall was at 26, Vardy hit 20. I think Fatawu was at 19, and only one guy missed the mark by like one. But everybody got 20 goals and assists. And that's their 80. They got there. For us, it was a lot more difficult. We didn't quite get there. Only two of us, like two of our players got there, Palmer and Jackson. Close to that tally. Nobody else even touched it. So the expectation is that you need to have at least one player who's able to offer you that 15 to 20, you know, mark. Obviously, we're counting on a new set piece department, and we're counting upon four guys who are 190 centimeters, sort of coming in and giving you 10 goals from set pieces, and maybe like preventing, more importantly, preventing 10 goals from set pieces. So that's a plus 10 right there. So even if you manage to hit, I would say 15 to 20, then you've got a good squad capable of getting top three. That's what your, you know, 80-point squad looks like. So in that ranking, Gallagher is probably somebody who can get close. He got 12 last season from a GA perspective. So that's what you want from that left central midfielder. And that's where Maresca has, you know, the idea of saying, okay, he's got Dewsbury Hall who understands the tactical requirements, who's able to offer both things going forward and coming back. So can he offer that 15 goal threshold? And for a player who offered 30% of Leicester's goals last season, goal and assist contributions last season, that's a good gamble to take. So just from a numbers standpoint, it makes sense. Also, the 8-10 role is quite curious because, you know, usually when your wingers are going 1v1, then you'll see the fullback sort of bombing forward to give the opposition fullback something to think about. In Maresca's system, that something to think about happens through the 8-10. So that number eight will underlap and try to go for cutbacks. So you'll see Caicedo actually end up a lot closer to the byline and crossing into the box, which is something you probably haven't seen before, but he will do that over and over again. And that's the requirement that will be from Chukwuemeka, from Gallagher, from Dewsbury Hall. And Keenan Dewsbury Hall does it superbly well. He has some excellent cutbacks on him. He's done it over and over again. So from a tactical standpoint, somebody who's well drilled in those movements again is a big advantage. And if he can help the others get up to speed, also superb. So from an overall standpoint, I understand the deal. I think he fits tactically. I think from a profile perspective, he's very good. Do you have a chance of getting 15 goals and assists from him? Yes. So you're trying to make up the deficits there. You didn't get Olise, who's also a 15 to 20 goal assist, but you get Kiernan
Yeah.
Dewsbury Hall at a much lower rate and at better wages. So can he provide the same impact is what is left to be seen.
Think that people might be raising with pitchforks when they hear the fact that you use Elise and Dewsbury Hall in the same sentence. But when you think about the contribution Dewsbury Hall made to Leicester last season, some of those numbers do not lie, and they just need to be maybe accounted for. Scaling up requirements when you go from the Championship to the Premier League, and when you go from being one of the main, if not the main guy, to being a cast within the cast of main guys who Enzo Maresca will be relying upon. I think the interesting thought that you've put out there is this idea of how are you going to construct a side that can hit 80 goals within the season? And if you have Nkunku coming back healthy, who should be a very, very strong contributor within this sense, with Jackson, hopefully continuing his season upon season growth. If you can avoid a major regression within Cole Palmer, it definitely lessens maybe some of the requirement on Dewsbury Hall. But I always feel like when you have more players who have a nose for goal and can figure out how they can contribute, sides just generally improve when you have more goal scorers in them. And what we've been crying out for, is maybe for a striker or for a winger, but you can't deny, I think, this idea that Dewsbury Hall knows how to score and should be able to positively contribute in an area where Chelsea were deficient over multiple of the last few seasons, and an ability to score and assist within goals and have some of those more creative players. And so I think I feel more comfortable and more confident about this signing after talking to you for just over 40 minutes here, Sam. But I think, what would be your last pitch to individuals who maybe are still on the fence with Dewsbury Hall and what he's going to do at Chelsea this season?
Yeah, I mean, they have every right to be, questioning the signing. I think you should be doing that to every single player who comes in. But I would say getting a player who's had Premier League experience, who's, at, I would say, a relatively good age at 25, 26. It's not a squad demographic that we sign usually. It's usually like 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds from South America. So this is a nice, refreshing change. Somebody who can contribute immediately was the need of the hour. And like I mentioned, if you do want your team to be hitting those targets, those 80 goal targets, not conceding as much and being able to contribute and compete on multiple fronts across next season, then you have to build a big squad. And I also think that he offers you some interesting shifts. Like he can, like I mentioned, he can play three different positions. And there's also like so much scope of figuring out where he fits out of possession as well. He works hard. So I think there's every bit of world where, in Leicester, obviously he's slotted into midfield and sometimes as like the second forward next to Vardy trying to press. If you want to incorporate Nkunku in that role, I think he can easily be the left-sided midfielder in a 4-4-2. He probably, in my opinion, in my eyes, he tracks and works harder than an Nkunku. So even being able to slot him as somebody who can play a Jackson and Kunku up front out of possession gives you like a pretty good thing to work with. So there are multiple benefits to the deal. I think he just slots in beautifully into the side, and there is a gaping requirement there. So like you mentioned, Nkunku is somebody who at his peak can give you 15, 10, so 25 GA, Palmer like seasons on the regular. That's his quality from Nkunku. Jackson in a bad season crossed 15. If he can manage to do that in a good one, then you're looking at some very, very good numbers. And Palmer again, I should mention 5 point, like he went past Dewsbury Hall in terms of shot creating action. So those three, I would say, are lock ins in terms of like hitting their numbers. The third guy needs to step up, and like the fourth guy needs to step up, and if that can be either Conor Gallagher, who got 12, or Dewsbury Hall, then you've got two very strong options competing against each other. And like you said, there's an uncertainty. Like, what if Gallagher leaves? Like, what happens then? You still have Chukwuemeka and Dewsbury Hall to be able to provide that kind of thrust. So it's a good deal. It's for good money. It doesn't make us break our weight structure or like have a panic buy. I think we saw the opportunity and the chance to get back at Brighton, and we took it. So happy with that.
Never a bad day when we can get one over on Brighton after all the pain that they've inflicted on our subconsciousness as supporters of Chelsea. But that feels like a good pitch. Let us know if you're watching on YouTube, likes, in the comments. Are you excited? Are you feeling good about Dewsbury-Hall? Are you feeling better after listening to Sam's assessment, or are you still jury out on the player? But that's going to do it for this one. Tons of more content coming your way this week as we get ready. Chelsea's preseason, 10 days away from time of recording, 13 days away from time of release until they're in Santa Clara. They're playing Wrexham in that first match. And boy, oh boy, we're going to have a lot that we want to talk about heading up to that and after that. Huge summer pods still ahead. So stay tuned for all that. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.